May the words of my mouth and the meditation of all our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O God, our strength and our hope. Amen. It's going to seem a little ironic that I'm going to talk about this, given that we didn't do it. But on a normal Sunday morning, not that any Sunday morning is normal, but on a regular Sunday morning, for the learning together time, we'd have children and anyone who's feeling childlike come to the front, and we'd have a conversation. Didn't do that this morning because, well, like I said, I wanted someone else to speak. But that's what we would normally do, and we'd have conversation. Now, I'm old enough to remember, and I know you are too, when we were just starting to do the whole let's have the kids at the front thing, right? Do you remember? Because it was right after the days, those glory days when Sunday school classes could be 50, 60, 80 kids, and there'd be more than one class. So they'd have to have their own classes because, you couldn't have them all come to the front. But then we started to do that thing where we'd have the kids come and sit with the minister or someone at the front, and there'd be a story or some sort of presentation to them, and we called it children's time. Some still do, or time for the children. Children's story. My personal favorite was time for the young at heart. But the point was to have the children come and sit at the front, which early on, I have to say I kind of cynically figured was because we still wanted to demonstrate we had children here, even though they weren't like 50 or 60 or 80 of them. But to be fair, I do think the point was to engage the children and to do it in a way that would be meaningful and helpful to them. I think, though, that especially early on, that was very much about, here is a story for you, or some kind of a presentation for you. And it's only been in the last little while, it's become more of a conversation. And that's why I like to call it learning together. Because having that conversation with not just the children, but the young at heart, having that kind of conversation, I think, is a great learning opportunity. There is tremendous wisdom in a child's heart. There is. And so here's something that happened this week. Our study group at the moment is, this is not a commercial, but our study group is about questions that people frequently ask. And the question this week was, what does it mean to be created in the image of God? So that wasn't a scratch. I thought my glasses were on my head. What does it mean to be created in the image of God, right? That's from Genesis, created in the image of God. And an interesting thing happened, and that was that Chris Struick had asked her sons that question and had written down their answer, and she shared it with everyone. And I did ask the boys permission to share. And so Wesley, who is 14, last Tuesday, we have to sing happy birthday to him afterwards. I meant to do that as part of the learning together, but we weren't at the front. It was Wesley's birthday. He was 14, going on 40, of course, but 14 on Tuesday. And Peter is 12. And Wesley answered the question, what does it mean to be created in the image of God, like this? I think that was said by a human, not God. It was just to hype ourselves up as a supreme being. Peter said, I think it's a figurative image, one of kindness, but we still get a choice on whether or not to act in kindness. The thing is, we probably could have stopped the study group right there, because the 2 points that I wanted most to make about that question of what does it mean to be created in the image of God is, first of all, we need to be very careful that in answering that question for ourselves, we don't turn it into creating God in our image, which was the very thing that Wes was trying to point out. Also, that being created in the image of God isn't about appearance, obviously. It's about what's in our heart, which is kindness and good. Right? In the creation story, everything is created good. God says everything is good, including you. So, if you're someone who really believes in that concept of original sin, we need to have a chat, because you are inherently good. You are not inherently sinful. Being created in the image of God means from the very beginning, and from the very beginning of each of our lives, we are created good. It's our factory setting. Now, here's an interesting thing, though. What happened immediately after that, Chris read those, and then there was some discussion. And one of the things that was said in that discussion was, yes, of course they would answer that way, because they were raised by parents. Thank you, Graham, also. They were raised by parents who created a loving environment for them, where they were open to questions, and they were encouraged to be themselves and to think for themselves and to learn by asking questions. Absolutely true. And you can see it every time they talk. That's why it's so great to have them at the front and have a conversation with them. And there are other kids here too who have had that same experience, and they say and think amazing things. Imagine what it would be like to live in an environment where that wasn't the case, where you weren't encouraged to be yourself, where the very essence of your culture was taken away from you. Imagine you lived in an environment where you were essentially being processed to think and act and behave a certain way, whether it was true to who you are or not. The great thing about this story that appears in 3 of the 4 Gospels about children being brought to Jesus isn't just how we understand Jesus' wisdom about coming to God as a child. Because, we can Bible study that to death, especially about the context in Luke, where it's in the middle of stories about being humble and gracious and generous and thinking of others. But I think we get the point Jesus is trying to make. It's not about being childish, it's about being childlike. And coming as a child means being open to knowing, being open to asking questions and welcoming love. But you also have to consider how the children got to Jesus, because they had to get through the disciples first. And they were having some trouble, which is why Jesus says, no, let them come. Why do you think the disciples were stopping the children from coming to Jesus? If you're old enough to remember the old days of church, you remember children should be seen and not heard in church. You're supposed to behave, very much like you all are right now. So you've learned well. You're not supposed to ask questions. You're supposed to listen to me tell you what you're supposed to think. That's what church is all about, isn't it? It is not. It's about creating a community where people feel they belong because of who they are and what they bring. And being open to people not only being who they are, but encouraging them to be more of who they are and to ask questions and to wonder. If we're not creating that environment, we're simply processing you. I think that's part of the point of this story. It's not just about coming to God as a child. It's about what gets in the way of that. And how historically, in particular, the church has been really good at getting in the way of that. You come the way we teach you. But couldn't I learn from you as well? How often have you heard me say, one day someone's going to interrupt me and they're going to have something to say and we're going to have a meaningful conversation and dialogue as a result of that? Because that happens repeatedly, by the way, on Sunday. Right here. If you think the learning together on a Sunday morning goes the way I think it's going to go, ever, it doesn't. I have an idea of what I want to talk about, but I stop there and I don't go very much further than that because I know the moment I start conversation here, it's going to go where they think it should go. That happens at the study group too. That happens in Bashaw. There is a regular monthly meeting called Gathering, which is essentially, well, it's this, with some singing. People bring songs, we watch, there's videos and things, but essentially there's a theme and we have conversation about it. And sometimes that conversation goes off the rails and it goes somewhere different. But it does that because that's where the people in the room took it. And it has never not been valuable. It has never not been a learning. It has never not been a positive experience. Because of the wisdom of the people in the room, the experience of the people in the room, and the willingness of people to share. Imagine if I took that away from you.